Thank you so much. First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers and especially the hack, leadership and all the counties and participants for really giving me this opportunity to be here to share some of my input into this particular aspect of AI. The discussion around my participation here did not start a few weeks ago. I think Rezian and I had this discussion, I think probably more than a year ago, of how we can be able to have this partnership where I can come and really be part of this very auspicious gathering. What I want to look at is something that has already been discussed. I know we don't have a lot of time. And in the last 3 days, there's been a lot of discussion around AI. There's been a lot of discussion around where do we start, and also discussions around what's the best approach that we need to implement as a county or a government or an institution or even an agency in moving the issue of AI. The perspective that I will take is probably just looking at what my colleague has just presented, and more importantly, trying to concentrate on what next in terms of the AI capability that we have and what needs to happen. So we are aware that there are many disadvantages or advantages that have been discussed on what AI could do and what AI cannot do. And it is true that AI cannot replace humans. We have to complement the capabilities of AI with what we are doing. But it's also important for us to be informed of what are the basic principles that are required, so that when you implement AI or use AI in whichever shape or form, you are following the fundamentals that have been agreed. What you see there are the list of countries that have been able to look at AI from a policy perspective in order to be able to discuss some of the very difficult issues that I'll share with you today, and then take them away and be able to contemplate on what should we do either as a county or even as parliament, so that we can be able to have a more coherent and effective way of the use of AI technology. There are only 2 countries. This was statistic that was taken roughly about the early 2000, I believe 2020. And by that time, it was only Kenya and South Africa in Africa that had actually looked at AI from a policy perspective. There are specific issues that you need to be aware of. And I'll go through some of these, and these are like 10 issues that you have to be aware of when it comes to AI usability. The first that has to be at the top of the list is the issue of why do we have to use AI? And we have to have this at the back of our mind. It is for the good use of technology. So therefore, issues such as aligning it with the development, the sustainable development agenda, and the well-being of the human fraternity is important. And I've underlined there very clearly, it is important that we develop what we call a trustworthy AI, something we can trust. I know it's difficult, but it's something that we can trust. Because if you look at biasness, for example, there are specific cases of biasness, and I'll show you an example, where you've got a biased way of how AI functions. So take, for example, the search engine. If you search for specific issues, and most of the AI engines were built, and I must say this very carefully, by men. So therefore, the search engines will have sort of like the man mentality. And the data that we have is posted in a certain way. So therefore, the engines are biased. they don't take into consideration the gender. So there is a push for this particular issue. AI should empower members of the society. So when you think about AI in whichever sector that you are, it should empower members of the society. It should enhance the public trust, because that's important in understanding what AI is. And one of the things that I've actually worked very hard on is to look at the issue of biasness of AI, especially in the engines, when it comes to the developers. I know we have people here who are technical. We have people here who are administrators, decision makers, and we also have practitioners. And what we've seen before is the issue where AI engines, because of the design, have a specific bias. And that is something that we've taken note of. And there's a paper there that you can refer to, which actually looks at gender bias of AI. The second principle is the human-centric principle. We should develop AI with the fundamental institutions of, or instruments of freedom, equality, fairness, the rule of law, and justice, and also data protection, which my colleague talked about. So therefore, when you're developing this system and using them, there has to be that value alignment of AI. It should not be used for the sake of punishing a specific community, for the sake of punishing a specific level of employers, for the sake of punishing a specific, or even alienating a specific sector of the society. So we should be able to have that in cognizance so that we are able to adhere to that. So therefore, a human-centric, principle number 2, is important. Principle number 3 is what Almajid talked about, the openness and transparency. We need a system that is open, a system that is transparent, a system that can be put through the rigorous process and be able to be seen to be doing what it says on the tin. It has to foster an understanding of AI systems, which what my colleague has tried to do. We need to make stakeholders aware of the interaction. And I think this is important, because if you're going to talk of AI at an employment level, to government officials, to members of parliament, to any institution or agency, it's important that we make things clear. It's also important that we look at things such as, how does it affect the actions that we have? How does AI affect what we are going to do? We've talked about, I remember at lunchtime, we were talking about the issue of employment. It will lead to unemployment of specific level of employees. It could be true. But as an institution, you should then put a framework of how you train those individuals to supervise the processes of AI. So therefore, as most of the speakers who have come before me have said, they've said that AI could lead to other opportunities. And that's important. Therefore, having the principle that says we have to be careful of who we employ and what this means is important as an institution. So therefore, that's something that has to be taken care of. And of course, adverse effects of AI are true, but they can be manageable. The fourth principle, and I think my colleague also touched a little bit of this, is robustness. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this one, because the safety and how secure AI is builds trust. So the systems must be robust. Before you get the software that you're going to deploy into your environment, the system that you want to buy into your environment, what amount of due diligence have you done from the source where it was developed? What amount of due diligence have you done to understand the mechanism of communication within the system? What amount of due diligence have you done to know when things go wrong, how do you actually mitigate those particular risks? So an issue of risk analysis is important. All actors should apply a systematic risk management You have to make sure that you understand that technology. And one thing that I would urge is that this is a very good platform to start this discussion. Many counties might want to buy a system. It might not be the same across all the counties, and it is allowed. But we need principles that guide all counties to understand what's the basic ingredients or foundation or components that our system needs to have in order to be compatible across the country, if that is the need, or across the region, given that we have also colleagues from other parts of the East African community. That's important, because when the system lands, like what Majid was talking about here, and gets the database improved, that information could be shared across the systems within the country or the nation or the entities that are using that particular system. So therefore, we need to understand that. There are some risks that we are aware of, but these risks can be made harder for the adversary in case they want to attack a system, but also we could be able to learn what are the best systems that are out there and the practice of how we use them. So principle number 4 is robustness, security, and safety. Accountability. All actors should be accountable. We should make sure that we are accountable of our action. What is the design, the development, and the process of operation, and even the deployment? How accountable are we? Do we have the right people in place? Do we have the right systems in place? Have we consulted across the stakeholders topology so that we can be able to understand that? And in accordance with the roles and the applicable regulatory frameworks that are in place, it's important that we do that. So therefore, accountability becomes very critical. Investment in AI research and development cannot be emphasized any further. We have to make sure that we have institutions, we have people, we have the systems, agencies that are looking at AI in a more critical way. I would urge that counties need to consider a concerted effort to understand what is the national agenda on AI. In Kenya, which I understand very well, the first discussion took place in 2018. And at the time, it was to discuss the policy on emerging technology. I know there's some discussion going on within the ministry to make sure that they can come up with specific policies that can guide things like AI, Internet of Things, and so forth. But I think countries or counties that are represented here need to be part of that particular conversation. So therefore, governments should consider the long-term public investment in R&D. That's important. We've talked about the issues around the private investment, because that also plays a key part, because private sector owns most of the businesses. They employ most of the people or the populations that we serve. And it's important that we take that into consideration. So therefore, investment in R&D is a key principle. The seventh principle is fostering digital ecosystem for AI. And this one is simply saying governments should foster the development of and access of digital ecosystem for the AI. That means encourage small entrepreneurs, small to medium enterprises to come up so that they can start using AI and have institutions that can provide guidance. Discussions such as this are very useful, and I'm very glad that this is a starting point. And we've seen the case of Estonia, where they're using their system and complementing that system in their parliamentary discussion. And don't take it for granted. Estonia started from very far to be where they are. So it's not just a matter of plug and play, but they can be a very good example of a country that has been able to go through the principles that I'm talking about to reach where they are. Okay. The second last one is how do we shape an enabling policy environment? I think it is important that this discussion should continue of how we should shape the policy environment, ensuring that we consider things such as experimental trials. It's risky to have an AI system in your parliament that you don't understand how it works. So therefore, it's advisable to have a trial, test it, understand it, agree on some of the issues, deliberate on the errors, improve on the performance, enhance how it actually delivers before you allow it to be part of the process or part of what we have. I've talked a lot around the continent on issues such as sandboxes, which you see there. So these are important tools that you can use as a regulator, where you can have specific rules that do not apply. So what it means is, for example, if we have a system that we want to test, we could allow a trial. We could use it for specific sessions in parliament or in the county debates, but test it as a parallel to the ongoing tools that you have. And that will give you a very good comparison of the performance and what issues are, and even to train people. It's also important for us to have this discussion of the policy, which leads to regulation and leads to legislation, so that we can legislate on issues that have been tried and tested. So that is important. How do we make sure that we get the policy in place? Something that can guide us, that tells us when you put in an AI system, make sure you take care of the employees, for example. Make sure that you are able to put a framework of how people can be able to enhance their skills, because they're going to be made redundant by the use of AI. These are basic principles that are very important. Last but not least is the human capacity and the labor market, which we just talked about. Governments should work closely with all stakeholders. It is not a matter of an individual. It's not a matter of a few. It is a multi-stakeholder engagement, including the public. So before you put that system, tell the public what you want to do. Tell the stakeholders where you are. Inform them of what you're trying to achieve. So governments should take those steps very seriously. And here we are referring to institutions, agencies, and even county governments as we know them today. So that's important. So therefore, we need to understand the labor market. What's the impact of AI into the labor market, and so forth. And then lastly, we need to cooperate. And I'm very glad within the Yala, they're here, with the East African community here. And indeed, most of this cooperation is taking place as we speak. So therefore, cooperation, not only within our borders, but outside our borders is important. It's important for us to have knowledge of people who understand the technology, the experts in the field, the practitioners in the field, so that we can be able to draw examples from different points. I would challenge that the document that was created for the benchmarking in Estonia should be shared across all participants within the region. Let's share information so that the country that can't afford to go to Estonia could learn from those who went to Estonia. So therefore, sharing of information, I know inherently we don't share, but sharing is important so that we can be able to learn across the piece. So these are 10 very important issues that we need to remember in order to be able to judge our path. And I know the question is now, how do we do that? With a conclusion, there is a way forward. So first of all, we need to make sure that we promote the understanding and the implementation of trustworthy AI. What we're doing now is very important. We have to promote it. We have to understand it, and we have to agree on it. And then the next bit is we need to engage. the users, the parliamentarians, and so forth, depending on what stakeholder segments you have, to understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. And please use the experts to guide you to be able to take the right decisions. That's important. And then the next step is to understand the country context. That means it could be a county, it could be a country, the context of what you're trying to achieve. Does it have the support of the overall government structure? Is it something that has been shown to be useful? And I think it is. And that will be very useful. And then, of course, lastly, is the issue of developing the policies, regulations, and the strategy framework of how you start building your application of a trustworthy AI, whether at the county level, government level, or even national level or regional level. So that's what I thought I should be able to share with you today. And I know we're short of time, but that actually concludes my presentation. But just off the cuff, I did have a set of other slides which we had agreed with my colleague that we shall make them available for you. Those slides give you the usage and how AI can be able to make your work effective. We've also talked about the qualifications of people who can be able to use AI, and I think Omajid touched a little bit on that. There's a need for us to continue with these particular sessions of this nature. What I would encourage is that let's try and create groups within the counties of individuals who can be able to help with the understanding of AI and issues that we've just talked about. That will be very useful. In my discussions, of course, with Resin, I've also offered that we can offer our technical expertise pro bono so that we can be able to make sure that the counties and other areas can be able to continue. Thank you so much.